Hello, and welcome to the Cultivating Confidence podcast. I am your host, Dr. Nicole Grams. I am a life coach who specializes in anxiety, health, and human design. And I also happen to be a functional medicine pharmacist. This podcast is a compilation of conversations that I've had with clients and colleagues. So listen in as we explore the mind, body, and soul's confidence in its many forms.
Yeah. So since my book came out, I've just been blown away by, all these like old classmates and, people from school, either older or younger than me, like just family members, like my parents, cousins and things reaching out and like thanking me for being so vulnerable about the really shitty experiences of relationships and a lot of really shameful and hurtful, painful, embarrassing ones. And I've had a lot of women sharing with me, some of the pain from their past relationships. And I've had the opportunity this week to meet with some of my old classmates for the first times in years.
Yeah.
And I couldn't believe, how that became such a central conversation, just talking about like how much, our past relationships kind of messed us up. And some of them are still single and like reaching out like, oh my gosh, I hope I can manifest, like what you did. I'm like, but do you see how long it took me to finally recognize and release the blocks of my own beliefs that I had around relationships?
Yeah. And you're ahead of the curve still.
Right? Like, holy buckets. I mean, some people, we often can hang on to those beliefs without knowing that, where they came from and just like assuming them as truth. And we might take them to the end of our lives. So yeah, you're right. I'm thankful that I realized when I did. But for as long as I knew about, like the law of attraction and learning more about my thoughts and like the power of now, Eckhart Tolle and his thing on the ego and separating from that. And that's when I started, gosh, that was at least 10 years ago, when I started like actively trying to manifest my partner. And I was detailing things like I was manifesting the partner that I am with now 10 years ago. And it took me 10 years to understand, like to finally find and realize the blocks that were holding me from manifesting him.
Yeah.
And also realizing, the growth, the personal growth that I do on the way. And I think one of the most important things is being comfortable with ourselves. Granted, I spent a long time like kind of resisting men in relationships like the plague and getting really independent and like digging my heels into it. But without that time to be on my own, and that followed a period where I was like from boyfriend to boyfriend and hopping around and, going through like the messiest relationship part of my experience. And I think a lot of the time I spent alone was out of, like regret and shame from that. But it also gave me the opportunity to make peace with being alone and being with myself.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people have a hard time with that too.
I think the idea of being comfortable with yourself is something that's so important for being in a relationship and any sort of relationship, because you can certainly find a relationship that does not apply, right? Like even if that does not apply for you, you can still find a relationship. But at least what I have noticed for myself, because I can only ever speak from my own experience, right? Is that when I was not comfortable with my relationship, I would externalize that did I say that right? When I was not comfortable with myself, I would externalize
or project it onto them. Yeah.
Right. And everything that was said I would take as a dagger to my heart, because like, oh, you can't say that, you're supposed to love me, all of me, right? But if you don't love all of yourself.
Exactly. then you manifest, you attract,
Yeah.
like attracts like. Every relationship is a mirror for us.
Yeah.
How we are, and this is hard to hear for a lot of people that have been in like some serious, abusive, traumatizing relationships.
Yeah.
We're mirroring their, our partner's behavior, how they treat us is a mirror of how we treat ourselves.
Yeah.
And a lot of times it seems hard to believe, because a lot of how we treat ourselves is simply what's going on in our mind,
Yeah.
what's happening in our head that nobody sees or hears.
Yeah. And let's pause for a second just to clarify, like, that does not mean you deserve to be abused.
No,
Not at
absolutely
all.
not.
Like, no one
Absolutely
here is
not.
saying this is what you deserve, but just notice if you find yourself in a pattern of relationships, or if you're just unable to leave, those sorts of things, like, what are you saying to yourself? Right.
And
That's
actually,
the point.
that's so
Not that you
important to
deserve
make
any
that
of it.
clear. No, but that's often a belief,
Yeah.
right? That's often the belief that keeps
Yeah.
it coming, even though we know, on a more basic level, that no, I do not deserve to be abused in this way. And in so many cases, I mean, it is like down to physical abuse, and like, man, the psychological abuse,
Mhm.
verbal abuse, like that. It is so painful. Um, but especially when you see that repeat cycle and keep manifesting those kind of partners, it
Mhm.
like becomes this deep-seated belief that you deserve it. I must have done something wrong. There must be something wrong with me that, deserve this behavior. But really, the only thing that's drawing that back in is that deep-seated belief in yourself, that you think those things, that you believe that is true, and it absolutely is not.
Yeah.
And it's not always easy to get yourself out of those situations.
Yeah.
But let me tell you, for anybody out there that is experiencing that, there is support, there is help out there to help get you out of those situations, because absolutely not. That is not deserved. It is not acceptable. No one should be going through extreme pain in relationships.
Right.
But dialing it back, even on a basic level, there are so many people that might not justify their relationship as abusive.
Mhm.
Oh, they're not hitting me, or they're not, screaming at me or telling me terrible things, but I still don't feel good. Honestly, a common theme, since my book came out, is being cheated on, cheating, and being in that tangled web of infidelity, and how much that hurts. And how many women, I cannot believe, have stayed, myself included, stayed in cheating relationships because, right, we thought, part of it was my fault. Oh,
What could I
whoops.
have done differently?
Yeah, what could I have done differently to, inspire them to stay faithful? And we tend to dump that all back on ourselves.
Yeah.
And it is absolutely not true. We have
Yeah.
no control over anyone else's behavior. To be honest with you, I've thought about it for years, and I still cannot rationalize the behavior of some of the partners I've had.
Yeah.
And it blew my mind the first time it happened to me. It's in, naturally in my nature, and if you get into astrology at all, I'm a Taurus, and like one of the things of Taurus is like, they're very stable and like loyal and dedicated to their people and blah blah blah. Like, that is so true. And it's really so sad to me to look back at my own history and like how I retaliated. Also a Taurus, the bull. The bullhead in me definitely came out in those relationships of,
Mhm.
I want to give you a dose of your own medicine.
Right.
We'll level it out and make it all even and fair again. And I mean,
Because
if you want
that's
to read all
healthy.
about yeah, that's healthy and that worked. Let me tell you, did
Right.
not at all. Just made
Right.
it worse.
Yeah.
But again, there's nothing, and that was out of kind of a desperate act to do something to control the other person's behavior.
Right. Well, and I wanted to touch on the concept. I heard this a while ago. I don't remember where from, but guilt seeks out punishment. So if you have a guilty conscience, or you feel like you're not worthy, and all of a sudden you have this perfect, thing, then you start to self-sabotage in ways that bring punishment onto you. Right. So that goes back directly to being comfortable with yourself and loving yourself. Like, if you feel you're worthy, then you don't have to seek out punishment for it. And it's not like oh, I actively feel guilty, so I'm a bad girl, right? Like that's not it. But it's a subconscious thing that things start to show up in our lives in ways that we don't realize we are creating.
Yes. And that's, I mean, I really love like I need to write that down because that, holy buckets, that like hit the nail on the head, that guilt seeks out
Mhm.
punishment. I absolutely lived that
Right.
and manifested that to its full extent throughout my life.
Yeah.
Um, until I finally recognized and had, I mean, it took coming to a place of surrender and acceptance that we are responsible for, the things that happen in our life. Or we have to at least take some responsibility,
Right.
right? There's things that happen, like disasters and acts of nature and things like that, right, we have absolutely no control of that. We have no control over other people's actions. But the the way we think and feel about ourselves and how we attract these repeat patterns in our lives. Yeah, if we're feeling guilty and shameful over any part of our past, any part of ourselves, that makes so much sense. And I absolutely lived it. And I know I've been talking with a lot of other women too, that of course we started manifesting our own punishment. If
Right.
you truly believe that you're guilty and deserve punishment, you're asking the universe to serve it to you.
Right. Well, I
And
mean, and look,
again, that does not mean you deserve it.
no.
Absolutely not. It's just that our mind got wired to believe that that was true.
Yeah. And I feel like that ties in really well with self-criticism of the
Mm,
like, oh, I did
mhm.
something wrong or I am wrong in some way. So therefore, nobody else externally is punishing me for this and they don't know about it. So I have to do it myself. And I've
Right.
been working through that for freaking decades at this point. Like,
Me
trying to
too.
figure out
Me
how to
too.
undo the self-criticism. But yeah, I mean, it all ties in together.
And that's part of, I know we've talked about it before too, it's part of the human experience. And I think the
Yeah.
sooner we accept that there will be ups and downs until
Yeah.
the end,
Yep.
we're never going to reach the state of perfection where we
Yeah.
feel great all the time. I mean,
There's no blissful
that's part of the
nirvana.
beauty, like that's the excitement of life, is to feel the full range of emotions. Um, but working on that self-criticism, right? I mean, a lot of the punishment that comes from that guilt, like you said, nobody else may ever see. No one may actually be inflicting it upon us, but just with our own thoughts in our own
Mhm.
mind and through
Right.
our own behaviors. Gosh, I know I went through several of them, of like holding, not allowing myself to enjoy certain things, just the self-defeating beliefs that could lead, to just feeling super depressed or anxious, holding high expectations of myself. Gosh, all different forms of self-sabotage, down to gosh, I've swung from like over exercising to overeating to all of the things in between, of like all the ways we can like physically sabotage ourselves. And
Mhm.
I know it can go so much deeper than that. Why,
Yeah.
like self-mutilation is a thing,
Mhm.
because that's a way of expressing self-punishment. And
Right.
again, it is never deserved. It's only a matter of shifting perspective and realizing that all that is a belief that our mind clung on to, right, and is creating our own punishment through our
Yeah.
beliefs that we are, this bad person or deserve to be punished. And that is absolutely, absolutely not true. No
Yeah.
matter what has happened in your life, no matter what you've done, there is no one on this earth that deserves, true. Well, I mean, we could take that, of course. Okay, there's some extreme cases of like murderers and rapists and things like that. I mean, there's some heinous things that humans do to each other on this earth. But ultimately, like, we do all have a soul, this divine soul that cannot be punished,
Yeah.
right? And
Well, and even yeah, I don't want to get too into like defending murderers and rapists and such, but
right.
most of the time when you get into the psychology of it, at least I go down rabbit holes of all this stuff. And like the concept of believing that everyone is doing the best they can So how do you make that make sense, right? How do you make that make sense? But if you go into their brain, do you think it would be harder and more painful to be the person inflicting the pain on another person or to be the victim? Right? Like it can be a real mind fuck sometimes of like, how do I be compassionate? And there's a difference between understanding and not holding people accountable for their actions, right? Like that, those are two separate things.
Right,
And what I'm saying is it makes sense how we got to this point if you can look into their brain to see like they are in a lot of pain themselves. And this is the best way that makes sense to them to do this sort of thing. And it's fucking terrible, right? Like it hurts a lot of people. Like those things
right.
aren't separate, and there needs to be some accountability there, right?
Oh, absolutely, for like acting out on those
Right,
beliefs. But you're right. I mean, studies have been done on some of the most heinous murderers in history.
right.
And is it not every single case, all of them have been abused
Yeah.
in some extreme way, especially in childhood, in the
Mhm.
most impactful time of our development, right?
Right.
When those beliefs and like terrible beliefs were embedded into their mind at such a young age that caused them to act out in
Right.
such horrifying ways. And again, I love how you worded that and like the separation between understanding and accountability.
Mhm.
Because if you're driven to the point of committing serious crimes, obviously there needs to be, some accountability
Right.
to you know, performing, like seeing out that action.
Yeah.
Um, but just understanding, right? Like what
Mhm.
is happening in our minds, right? And like
Yeah.
where is our mind at and where our beliefs are coming from.
Yeah.
And bringing it just back to the basic, to the relationship thing.
Right. Well,
Um,
and a parallel that my mind is drawing right now is like observing others in the relationships that they have.
mhm,
So the prime example that most of us have is our parents or parental figures, right? Whether that's a step parent or, whatever. But we learn what love looks like from the people that we're raised by. So if you look back at your own parents, I'll just keep calling them parents because that's what it makes it easier. But if you look at what your parents did, how they loved each other, that's how you believed love should look, right? So if it was abusive, if you were abused and told that, oh, I love you, but you deserve to be hit, basically, if you need to be spanked, whatever, because you've been bad, but oh, also I love you. When it's your abuser that is also your protector, it gets all messed up. And it doesn't have to be just physical abuse by any stretch, but you're shown that this is what love looks like. And then you repeat that pattern if you don't question it.
right. And what's interesting too, I've reflected on that a lot because in my case, my parents were in a very stable relationship. And my dad, bless his heart, like is just a fine example of what a man should be, in my opinion. A very dedicated family man, always treated us all, he just had two daughters and my mom, and treated us women with utmost respect, just like his father did with his wife and our family. So I had the most beautiful examples of relationships to follow. And what
Mhm.
I'm actually just realizing now, so I've pondered a lot of like, how did I manifest um such unhealthy relationships early on? When we say typically for women, we look at our relationship with our dad, men, their relationship with their mom, how they treat them. I'm like, I had such a good relationship with my dad. How did I manifest this drama and this crap? And I think in a way it was because I believed, I had this belief that men were good at the beginning, that if he's interested in me, then he's interested in only me and he's going to be loyal and this is going to be great.
Mm.
And it almost made me clearly that much more vulnerable to
Mhm.
jump into these relationships and assume that they're going to be everything that I want them to be.
Yeah.
And was it a rude awakening when they were not? And then
Yeah.
that like flipped the switch where then I suddenly was like, wait, what is this
Right.
nonsense? And like retaliated and then continued repeating that pattern.
Oh, so yeah, that draws back to internalizing it. This worldview that I have of men are good, something must be wrong with me.
Yep, absolutely. And then it switched the belief
Mhm.
where then from that point, after manifesting some, painful, dramatic relationships that I like shut it down, switched the belief. Oh, well, okay, maybe it ended with my dad's generation, and now everyone my age, you know, they're all assholes and
Yeah.
liars and players and all of the things. And then that was the new belief I created. Again, that harbored from that, like, oh, what did I do wrong? Oh my gosh, is it,
Mhm.
something wrong with me that like I can't make these men stay faithful and be good and honest to me? And so then I shut it all down and assumed they're all that way. And I want nothing to do with them. And the ones that did, crawl through the cracks did exactly the same thing. And it kept me putting that guard up even higher and higher over
Mhm.
the years. And I did not manifest a healthy relationship until I recognized that dang belief that haunted me for over a decade. And it took one more incidence of running into that where I suddenly went, holy buckets. I've been believing this for a really long time.
Mhm.
And I had a lot of like this anger came up in me that again, I manifested another creepy asshole. Wow, where are they coming from? And just in a recognizing that belief, that reminder of like all men are assholes was like,
Yeah.
oh, that's why I'm attracting
Yeah.
assholes. Because I
I think
believed it so strongly.
I think mine was more drama, like fight hard, love hard, but
Ooh,
drama.
definitely. Oh yeah. Oh gosh. So much. So much. Even, with the father of my child too, especially. I mean, we became parents at such a young age. So, I mean, throw in the hormones, the teenage hormones in with it, and the drama already. And at that time, like the partying and shenanigans, of, young kids, and then throw in having a baby with that. Like
Mhm.
most dramatic relation, well, one of the two most dramatic relationships of my life where yeah,
Yeah.
love hard, fight hard. Oh,
Yeah. So in your now what appears to be a stable, healthy relationship, right? Is this the first one of your adulthood that has been like this?
yep.
Has it been, have you found yourself like fighting it?
Now, let's see. Now, no, but at the beginning, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I almost dismissed this guy immediately because I'm like, nope, he's too cute. He's going to be an asshole. He's probably full of shit. I
Yeah.
started judging him in all of the ways that I learned to judge every other man in my
Yeah.
past. And this was interesting. I read this after we made it past that point, but I read somewhere on a post that after 3 to 4 months, someone's true colors will come out. They
Hmm.
can, no matter what they appear to be, by 3 to 4 months, they cannot hide it anymore. And I realized the 3 to 4 month mark in our relationship was the hardest because our true colors were totally coming out. And I was getting so scared, that I
Hmm.
was falling in and like, oh my gosh, I'm at the point where this guy could really hurt me. Is stuff going to start coming out of the woodwork now?
Hmm.
And even looking back on one past relationship that lasted 3 to 4 months, that exactly happened. At 3 to 4 months, the true colors came out. I realized he was not what he said he was, and it was horrifying and traumatizing, right?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
this time I was waiting, like I was waiting for the old triggers to come. I was waiting, for the catch, waiting for the thing to happen that was going to make me run, because that's all I knew was to run. Oh, getting too close, time to run.
Hmm.
But we made it through there because as his true colors kept coming out, I'm like, oh my gosh, you're really not like the rest. And you know who he reminds me of the most is my father. It blows me away just watching him work, just at the way he speaks and his behavior and how he treats me. I'm like, wow, I finally manifested the relationship that reflects how my grandfather treated my grandma and how my dad treated my mom. I finally broke that belief that no one of this generation is like that anymore, like
Hmm.
honest and hardworking,
Yeah.
chivalrous.
Yep.
Chivalry is not dead, my friends.
Yeah.
and but it took getting past that point because from the beginning, I was ready to run. And if it weren't for my spiritual practice, I literally had spirit coming through and channeling, like telling me, don't run, stop it.
Mm.
And like telling me hints of like, this is meant, like you need to be in
Mhm.
this right now, you have to give it a chance. And I was even told once I made it past that point, like spirit telling me, we had to tell you all of these things or you would have ruined it by now.
Mhm.
just acting out of old
Patterns.
habits, right?
Right. Yeah.
So
I
I'm
think
glad you asked that, because right, once you do manifest that healthy relationship, I mean, hang in there and trust it. I mean, you always have to listen to your gut, whether you know, it'll tell you when you're in an unhealthy relationship and when you are. But
yeah.
after being, you know, manifesting a long history of unhealthy relationships, then it becomes like muscle memory, you
Right.
know, just
Well,
out
and
of
that's
habit.
kind of where I was going with it, because I know
Yeah.
I experienced this and still do sometimes. And recently had a conversation about how like my trauma brain um
Hmm.
is it works so drastically different than his. And I'm like, I am very grateful that you don't understand this, but that makes it so much harder to explain, because this is just what is for me. And
Yeah.
I've been doing work for years to try to figure it out and try to smooth out the wrinkles, and well, maybe not smooth out the brain wrinkles, but anyway, like, but like smooth out the pieces that and fill in the cracks and like repair, right? I've been in repair mode for years now, and I still come up against, as I grow, as I expand, this stuff keeps coming up in different ways, in big ways. But like, I was suspicious at first, and I know that it's not my experience alone, because I've had conversations with people close to me in my life about how they're going through similar things,
Yep.
about like how you start to try to sabotage it because it can't possibly be this good, because the last time it was this good, it all fell apart in royal fashion. And like, then you
Hmm.
start like blaming and shaming and doing all the things on someone who is not traumatized and has no idea why you're acting so crazy.
Oh my gosh, we laugh, but like in these moments,
Right.
it's
It's
yeah.
real. It's
Keeping,
deep and hurts bad.
and I'm glad that you said, yeah, that trauma brain, because it just takes that one instance, that one relationship to really do some serious lasting
Mhm.
damage.
And when you've
Um,
convinced yourself that this is what love is, and no, I just need to,
mhm.
alter something about me, or some circumstance needs to be different in order for this other person to act differently, right? Like, that's what gets wired in our brains. And it takes some serious effort to undo that.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, but I feel like that's a lot of the work that we do. And
Yeah.
now that I've like fully been through it and came
Mhm.
full circle, because even, you know, that's interesting. That is so much harder to try to work through your past relationship trauma with someone that hasn't had it.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Well, and
I've
almost like, at least in my experience, I wouldn't want to do it any other way, because he's so like non-responsive sometimes when I'm in crazy mode. And like, honestly, that's why I married this guy, because he didn't yell back at me when I yelled at him. When I was
mm,
being crazy, he was just like, all right, can we just really? And I was
but
like,
then
what?
that's
What do you mean? Can we just like, really? Huh? You're supposed to get mad. You're supposed to, like, I'm trying to press all your buttons and it's not working. What is wrong with you? Clearly there's something wrong
mm.
with you. I need to leave. Like,
And it's so beautiful that we can laugh about it now
yeah.
and like see it from that light, but it's so real when you're
Yeah.
so used to having that conflict and that drama in the relationship, and you're up against someone that's not giving it back to you. At
Mhm.
first it's like, well, what the hell?
This
This is
is
how
not
it
what my
is.
brain expected to have happen.
Yeah.
What?
But now, I mean, how beautiful that you had, you know, like this perfect partner to mirror that for you and like to not respond and give you that experience.
Yeah.
I
Well,
was
and
just
now
laughing.
when he does occasionally respond, I'm like, oh, I went too far this time. This was too far. It was my fault. I
And
find
to
myself in this crazy
surrender.
dance in my head of the like, oh, okay, yep. I can
No,
see how this is maybe not getting the response you're
yeah.
hoping for.
And I mean, it takes that experience though, right?
Yeah.
To be
Oh
able to
yeah.
come back. Okay, now I'm in this situation again. What's not
Mhm.
working? What is? how am I going to handle it differently this time? But
Mhm.
it can be hard because, yeah, our brains can get hardwired to expect this certain, even the most painful situation to
Yeah.
unfold again. And when it doesn't, we don't know what to do. I did the same thing in my healthy relationship now of like waiting for that catch, waiting for the first lie to be caught,
Mhm.
for the first whatever, Ooh, and for me, plans changing was really tough
Mm.
because in the past, if plans changed, if someone like couldn't, do whatever, then it meant, oh, well, then they're doing something else. If they're not with me, they're with
Mm.
someone else.
Yeah.
And in this case, it's absolutely not true. And like
It's just a human
accepting that
thing.
and like believing like, oh, this one's not lying to me. But
Yeah.
at the same time, too, he had been through plenty of trauma. He was actually married for a long time. And which was super intimidating to me, because I've never been in that long of a relationship. And learning, what his traumas were and his fear of getting
Mhm.
too close. And he knowing that in that, like the first 3 to 4 months, that he was scared looking at me like that I was the wild card, really, that I was going to up and run because he knew my history of doing it, right? And he had history of that happening to before. So at the same time I was waiting for the catch, he was kind of waiting for it too. And
Mhm.
once we made it past that, man, that 3 to 4 month mark, like a lot changed, like our guards came down and we realized like, oh wow, no, we both are genuinely in this. And I love, like, I have been away from him for the last few days for the first time in a few months, which I'm like, wow, I think about him and I'm like, my heart's getting like feeling the flutters and all of that, like
Oh,
we
you
just
miss
met
him.
again. I know I miss him. And I went so long, like refusing to miss anybody and like,
Yeah.
nope, I'm doing this by myself.
Yeah.
And and like as I get to know him better, and this is what I was waiting for so long, instead of the more I got to know someone in the past, the more they irritated me and pissed me off. But in this case, like the more I know him and like the more we have, we've had plenty of our own breakdowns over the stress of life. And the
Mhm.
more vulnerable we've been with each other and opening up in those moments, before at first I'd be scared to be vulnerable because then that meant, oh, I'm just handing out my open heart for them to
Mhm.
break and shatter in front of me.
Yep.
And in this case, like he's responded with like so much understanding and we've been opening each other's eyes to like this fascinating world of who we are. And I respect him more every day, the more I learn about him. And
Mhm.
that kind of partnership is out there for everyone. And now I feel like, especially now that this book came out and realizing that it was kind of telling this like traumatic love story in parallel to my spiritual path and growth, that I'm kind of, I don't know why I was surprised, but I love that people are coming to me now wanting to talk about
Yeah.
manifesting that healthy relationship
Yeah.
because it is so possible. And to just be vulnerable and to not, not that we need to dish out all of the details and air out our dirty laundry, to everybody of all the crap that we've been through. Trust me,
Mhm.
there are so many more details I could have included in that book
Yeah.
that,
Right.
just wasn't necessary.
Mhm.
But to be vulnerable enough to admit, if even to ourselves, you know, to be able to look back at some of the painful part of our past and look at it with compassion instead of shame or blame or
Mhm.
guilt, and forgive ourselves for those moments, to accept that all of the pain of our past relationships happened for a reason, for us to learn from and to grow from. And so that once we do get in that beautiful, um, healthy relationship, we will appreciate it that much more. I think that is the root of why I love this guy more and more every day, because I'm just blown away. Like, yes, this is the healthy, good feeling I was waiting so long for.
Yeah.
And all it took was owning my own beliefs and looking at how I was viewing and assuming
Yeah.
relationships would go, assuming, what men would be like, and just shifting that belief in myself is all it
Right.
took to open
Well,
myself.
and we don't have enough time to be diving into this whole topic, but I think also recognizing that in order to have a relationship like that, you have to be vulnerable. You have to
Yes.
you have to be willing to have your heart broken in order to risk love at that level.
That is so true.
And it hurts. It is like physically painful. It triggers pain signals in your brain when you are being vulnerable with someone, especially if you have that history of every time this happens, I get something thrown back in my face, right? Like
Yeah.
when you have that history and that's what brain is used to expecting, then you have to be like, okay, no, this is going to be safe. Or, well, I'm going to be physically safe by doing this. And I'm going to have my own back if it comes crumbling down, right? Like trust in
Yes.
yourself and knowing that even if it all falls apart, it is all fallen apart together. And while it really sucked, I know how to put it back for me.
I love that. All right. The most important relationship that'll be the foundation of
Mhm.
every other relationship you ever have
Yep.
is the relationship you have with yourself. The most important one that must come first, freeing yourself of guilt and shame from your past and knowing, like, no, I am proud of who I am.
Yeah.
I'm proud of all that I've overcome, all that I've been through. I am a survivor. I'm a badass and I'm awesome. And I'm so worthy of receiving all of the love in my heart that I want to give. But that love, my own love, has got to come to me first.
Yep. I have to have my own back in order to let myself be vulnerable and let
Yes.
myself risk the heartbreak to find the love.
Mm-hmm. It's so scary, but that's why we do the work that we do, right? We're constantly doing the work with ourselves, and to be able to share and support other people doing that, because it's not an easy thing. Oh my gosh, if I didn't have the support system that I have, I don't think I would have been able to make it to this point and to help heal myself and be able to love myself in this way, because that is the first and often the hardest step, is to love ourselves. But it's the most rewarding relationship we will ever have. And it's where it all begins.
Thank you for taking the time to listen in today. Many of you will be able to take the ideas that you've heard and apply them in your daily life, and that's really all you need. That's amazing. But for those of you who could use a little one-on-one help with how to make these things actually work for you in your real life, please reach out. The link to schedule a consult with me is in the show notes. You don't have to do this alone. See you soon.